Nintendo went through a big yarn phase throughout the 2010s. But of all those games, Yoshi's Woolly World is the one that stands out on its own, with its beautiful crochet art style. But that's not how it was originally going to look. Early footage and tons of unused test maps prove that the game went through several design changes throughout development. From flat 2D visuals to 3D walk into the background style levels to ultra realistic environments and everything in between. We're gonna see it all in this video, along with a fantastic look at the people behind the game's development. So on this episode of Beta64, we're gonna talk all about the development of Yoshi's Woolly World.
But first, a word from our sponsor, EveryPlate.
EveryPlate, an affordable home cooking box that delivers delicious meals right to your door. I've been personally using EveryPlate to learn how to cook and reduce mealtime stress for the past 3 months, and it has been amazing. Instead of eating the same meals over and over again, I'm actually cooking new things every week that taste really good. Look at all these fresh ingredients. And these are the recipes. Ooh, mac and cheese. You know, the thing I like the most about EveryPlate is that I can actually find something to eat here. Yeah, I'm a pretty picky eater. And after researching tons of different meal kits, EveryPlate was the only one that consistently had foods that I wanted to try. Not to mention the price was affordable and fit right into our budget. And even though my cooking skills are admittedly lackluster, EveryPlate's simple, clear instructions have helped me feel more confident in the kitchen. I mean, look how good this looks. But how does it taste? Don't mind if I do.
That's really good. It looks like a mess.
So, are you two ready to be freed of the constant stress of dinner planning and grocery shopping? Try EveryPlate for yourself for just $2.99 a meal for your first box. Plus, get free steak for a month at everyplate.com with code BETASTK26. Or you can just scan the QR code or click the link in the description. And now, back to the development of Yoshi's Woolly World.
Yoshi's Woolly World was first announced on January 23, 2013, during Nintendo's Wii U Direct. Except it wasn't called Woolly World. It was actually revealed under a different name, Yarn Yoshi. And this game was a big deal. Yarn Yoshi was going to be the first console game featuring Yoshi since Yoshi's Story, which released in North America in 1998. Plus, Takashi Tezuka was going to be deeply involved in the game's development. He was one of the directors of Yoshi's Island and the producer of Yoshi's Story. Not to mention, Tezuka literally invented Yoshi's Flutter Jump. He was the perfect person for the job. It was also announced that Tezuka would be working alongside the development team behind Kirby's Epic Yarn. Good feel. But what would this new Yarn Yoshi game be about? Well, yarn, of course, just like Kirby's Epic Yarn. But if you compare the retail build of Yoshi's Woolly World to Kirby's Epic Yarn, they don't really look all that similar. Yoshi and his world have more of a 3D look to it, since he's in a crochet amigurumi form rather than just a couple of threads of yarn like Kirby's made out of. But that's not how it was originally going to be. Yarn Yoshi's reveal in the Wii U Direct gave us more than just the title. We also got a brief look at the gameplay itself, and it looks very different from Yoshi's Woolly World. Everything is just so much flatter, with an art style more in line with Kirby's Epic Yarn. The Shy Guys were also following the same trend of only being made out of small bits of yarn, unlike their final form. But this is where things get very interesting. Normally, when Yoshi eats a Shy Guy, the enemy gets turned into a yarn ball. But that is not how it worked in the game's early build. Instead, Yoshi eats the yarn and then adds it to himself, allowing him to become a 3D crochet plush. And that's not all. After the Direct shows off this gameplay footage, we also get treated to some screenshots that present us with new worlds. This one of a forest sunset shows off an entirely 3D background, a massive departure from the footage we saw earlier. It's almost as if the game was going to start out flat and then would get more and more three-dimensional as the game went on. That, or they were just kind of throwing anything at the wall to see what stuck. I mean, check this out. Here's Yoshi running along cushions on a real-world windowsill. Does that mean this game would have taken place in the real world? I mean, maybe. at one point. But according to an interview with Tezuka, this phase of development was simply one of trial and error. Do we make Yoshi and his environment out of strands of yarn, crocheted yarn, or maybe something else? It took many prototypes before they settled on the iconic stuffed yarn look for the final game. But that doesn't mean that everything shown off in this direct was just a random choice. At this point, they had already settled on at least one idea: that Yoshi should transform. We can even see a screenshot in the direct of Mega Yoshi, which made it all the way into the final version. And fun fact, those transformations were added into the game just as fun little breaks from normal gameplay. Just little surprises added in every once in a while that let the player fly around, dig in the ground, and destroy anything in their path. This shouldn't be surprising. After all, we know just how much Tezuka loves adding surprises to games he works on. And that's especially noticeable in one of his later titles, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Did you know I made a video all about the development of this game, complete with early footage and screenshots of scrapped wonders? It's true. I'll put a link in the description so you can watch it after the video. So that was the entire announcement of Yarn Yoshi. And even though we got actual gameplay footage, which is awesome, there was still no logo reveal, no release window, nothing. People were okay with that though. They expected we'd get to see more of the game in just a few months at E3 2013. But Yarn Yoshi was nowhere to be found. Now we did get to see Yoshi's new island at the show, so at least Yoshi appeared in some capacity, but for IGN, it wasn't enough. They wanted to know why the yarn was missing. So when they interviewed Tezuka about Yoshi's new island, they decided to ask about Yarn Yoshi's whereabouts too, to which he replied that it just wasn't ready to show. He wasn't able to say much more than that, but he was willing to talk about Good Feel and how they began working together to make Yarn Yoshi. As you'd expect, it all started when Tezuka saw their work on Kirby's Epic Yarn. It was just such a beautiful looking game, with an art style he felt would fit perfectly with Yoshi. After all, this crafted feel has been a part of the series since the very beginning. Yoshi's Island went for a hand-drawn look, and Yoshi's story had that pop-up book aesthetic. With Yarn Yoshi, they would follow this trend by using yarn. But that being said, Tezuka didn't ask Good Feel to just make a sequel to Kirby's Epic Yarn, but this time with Yoshi. Instead, the plan was to make a normal Yoshi game that just so happened to also be made out of yarn and fabric. And when I say made out of yarn and fabric, I don't mean that everything just needed to look like that. It needed to be made out of the stuff. Cushions need to squish as Yoshi runs over them. Walls need to be unraveled to reveal new areas. It wasn't just about art style. The yarn was meant to add in new gameplay elements that weren't possible in previous games in the series. And speaking of a previous game, Kirby's Epic Yarn was all about appealing to younger players, as well as those who were here just to have a relaxing, fun time with Kirby. Because of that choice, while many people did find the game enjoyable, there was still a lot of people that didn't like its lack of any real challenge or consequences. But since Yarn Yoshi was intended from the beginning to just be a regular Yoshi game, things were going to be different. That does beg the question though, what exactly is a Yoshi game? Well, it's a lot like Mario, but according to Tezuka, there is a major difference. Yoshi games are more centered around exploration at your own pace. Once the team at Good Feel understood that, development of Yarn Yoshi progressed smoothly, without issue. In fact, development of the game went smoothly on multiple fronts. For instance, everyone was starting out with a clear goal in mind for what the visual of the games would look like. Because of that, the development team was able to stay on the same page, leading to an enjoyable brainstorming experience. But what exactly was that visual goal, besides everything just being made out of yarn? Well, the style that they were going for was to make things feel handmade. In order to accomplish this, they actually handmade plushies of Yoshi and other characters, and modeled the game after those. It took a lot of effort and a lot of time to make, but it felt like a necessary step to really achieve the look that they wanted, and I think it paid off very well. But this was all happening behind the scenes. We didn't get to see Yarn Yoshi again until E3 2014, which means we were waiting roughly a year and a half since the game's initial reveal to learn more about it.
So what did they change in that long stretch of time? Well, pretty much everything, including the name. Yoshi's new outing was no longer going to be called Yarn Yoshi. Instead, it was going to be called Yoshi's Woolly World.
Oh, and would you look at that? The logo shown here during the E3 2014 Nintendo Direct is different from the final version. Technically, every part of this logo was changed in some way. Like there's this additional stitching around the logo, the yarn balls are positioned differently, the button size changed, and I could go on, but it's all very subtle. So instead of comparing this logo for the next 10 minutes, let's compare the actual early trailer to the final game and see what differences are in the gameplay itself. It all starts out with level 1-1, also known as Yarn Yoshi Takes Shape. And we've already got our first change, the start text, which was originally made out of ribbons instead of these patches. And since we've already got the early and final versions side by side, check out the colors. To me, they appear more muted in the E3 2014 build, not nearly as bright and colorful as the final game. Walking a bit forward, and there's another change. The beads are a different color in this trailer, and let me tell you, that is a change that appears a lot, so keep an eye out for it. But it's not just the beads themselves that changed, the bead counter has a different icon too, which showcases 3 different bead colors instead of just red. And fun fact, this early icon is still in the final game, just unused. It can be found in the file pause_old.gfa, alongside some other early icons, like this one for the smiley flower and this one for the wonder wool. But while the bead icon is completely different from its final counterpart, the others just look to be flatter. And there's also one more very interesting early icon, but we'll get to that later on in the video. Instead, let's head back to the trailer and check out some more differences that are found throughout this early footage. First off, unlike the retail build, you are not going to find any message blocks to help you in your journey. They're not here, or even here. Though this section has another change. The wing cloud appears to be missing, with this yarn basket taking its place. But where did it go? Well, it turns out this cloud was originally placed in the secret area, right above where it would eventually end up. Because this cloud doesn't give you anything special, just some hearts, it made more sense to have it moved out of the secret room and onto the main path, so that way the player could more easily reheal after the first section. Speaking of these wing clouds, towards the end of stage 1-1, you have to hit a few of them in order to grow flowers so you can reach the goal. And it's the same way in the trailer too. But there is a difference here. There's no arrow pointing to the hidden cloud. That was added into the final game because people playing the demo at E3 would often miss this. If they couldn't find it, they couldn't progress in the stage, so the arrow made it easier to understand what to do and avoid potential frustration.
Watching people play through your game and determining how to keep them from getting stuck is an incredibly important aspect to modern game development. And adding arrows to important hidden objects early in the game was just one change the developers made in order to reduce player confusion.
The trailer also shows us a change in stage 1-3, known as Sponge Cave Spelunking. In the final game, the spring ball over here is easily visible. This teaches you that you can remove Sponge on your own without relying on this chomp rock. But in the trailer, you were barely able to see it at all. It was there, but you'd have no idea unless you were just randomly throwing yarn balls all around. So you can see why they would want to change that. The secret area that spring ball leads you to is also a bit different, since it's missing the smiley flower that's normally up there. That means that not only was this place harder to find in the early build, but it also had less stuff in it too. But the same can't be said about the area underneath it. It's clear that there's a lot more sponge here than usual, and this is also a change that appears in various places throughout the early footage. Like in this area, where Yoshi pushes a different colored chomp rock through some extra sponge and extra enemies. Other than that, stage 1-3 also has an extra wing cloud here in the trailer that got removed later on. The mushroom platforms here swapped colors and have different looking stems, and these beads here, they have a hidden stamp patch in the final game, but are just normal beads in the trailer. Now there is one more stage that got showcased in the E3 2014 Direct. Stage 3-5, Fluffin' Puffin' Babysitting, which shows big and small changes. For a small change, there was originally more clouds in this early build when compared to the final game. I have no idea why they removed them from the background, but okay. And a little bit before that, we can also see that the Wonderwool ended up becoming a smiley flower instead. And speaking of Wonderwool, this part of the trailer shows us a pretty fundamental change with them. First off, it's a different color, orange instead of white, and then when Yoshi collects it, you can see that originally, stages only had 3 Wonderwools to collect instead of 5. So that means every stage we've seen here are missing 2 Wonderwools. For instance, this yellow wool in stage 1-1 isn't in the trailer, and then there's another missing Wonderwool in Sponge Cave Spelunking 2. But here's the thing, this footage here is not from Nintendo's E3 2014 Direct. No, Nintendo also uploaded a completely separate trailer to YouTube on the same day as the Direct. This new trailer uses the same build of Yoshi's Woolly World, but we do get to see some new areas of familiar stages that showcase even more changes, like different colored Wonderwool with beads surrounding it in stage 1-3. Plus, there's a different color Shy Guy spawning on the flower in stage 1-1, and there's missing Wonderwool in stage 3-5 that would normally spawn when hitting this winged cloud. But don't get it twisted. Sure, this second trailer is mostly just stages we've already seen, but it also gives us a first look at the boss battles, specifically the one with Bunsen the hot dog. And the changes start right away with this opening cutscene. See, in the final game, Kamek shows up to cause this normal pup to grow and become a giant hot dog, which understandably freaks out Yoshi. But in this early build of the game, Kamek is nowhere to be seen, and Bunsen's roar is what startles the Yoshis instead of Kamek's magic spell. The battle itself, though, is pretty much the same gameplay-wise, with the goal being to tie up Bunsen's mouth with yarn when he turns gray. But while the final game has Bunsen holding this gray color scheme after getting tied up, and then slowly turning red as he breaks out of the yarn, the early version has him turning back to red immediately instead.
In Nintendo's E3 Direct, it was announced that Yoshi's Woolly World was going to be released in 2015. And that was it. Quite a large release window. But on their official E3 2014 website, it was a different story. There we got a slightly more narrowed down release window, with it being set to release the first half of 2015. But before we leave 2014 for good, we should check out Yoshi Woolly World's E3 show floor demo. That's right, for the first time at E3 2014, attendees could play an actual demo of the game. Now, since it's based off the same build that we saw in the trailers earlier, any of those differences also apply to this new footage. That being said, there's still a lot more to look at here because we can now see 3 early courses in their entirety.
Now, as you'd guess, these 3 early courses are the exact same ones from the trailer: Yarn Yoshi Takes Shape, Sponge Cave Spelunking, and Fluffy Puffin Babysitting. But before we dive in, let's start things off at the title screen, which instead of being an overhead view of the final game's hub world, here at E3, it's just a still image that's been blurred, along with a very different looking font. And it's not just the title screen that's simpler looking, the loading screen follows suit with a simple black screen instead of a nice fabric background. Once we load into Course 1, as I said, it is the same as the trailer, which means that yes, there are still only 3 Wonderwools per stage. And you can see that on the course results screen too. But that is not all you can see here. Pretty much every part of this billboard is different in some way. First off, your bead count is shown on the board instead of on the bottom left of the screen. The icon for Yoshi is an actual drawing of him instead of a Yarn Yoshi patch. Your health isn't being shown on the results screen, the Smiley Flower and Wonderwool originally had labels, and the stamp patches are nowhere to be found. And to top it all off, there's an early course icon on the board too that looks very similar to the one that appears at the beginning of World 1 stages in the final version. After viewing your results, you get a nice thanks for playing screen that isn't nearly as detailed as the one in the final game. But that's just Course 1. What about Course 2? Well, the first thing you'll notice if we unmute the audio is that the song that plays in the beginning is completely different, with someone playing some fantastic acoustic guitar. The final game just has it playing the same song from stage 1-1, with the original track being moved over to the hub world, Craft Island. And speaking of acoustic guitar, it's about time that I introduce you to one of Yoshi Woolly World's composers, Tomoya Tomita, who had previously worked on composing the music for Kirby's Epic Yarn. Turns out he had originally planned to use a bunch of acoustic guitar in Epic Yarn's soundtrack, but ended up giving up on the idea, instead focusing on piano. So this time for Woolly World, he was going to give the instrument the spotlight he felt it deserved. To accomplish this, while he had played guitar for many years, he decided to get a refresher before writing the game's music, taking lessons and even cutting his nails differently to help while playing. But why all the effort? Well, it's because he loved country music, and that was exactly what he wanted to capture in Woolly World. Unfortunately, the song he wrote here for the beginning of Course 2 didn't make it into the final stage, but that's not the only change you're gonna find in this course. Turns out there's an entire area missing from Course 2 in the E3 demo. After you go through the first pipe, the final game has you enter a room that's basically there just to teach you how to ground pound. After that, you're gonna reach this next area with a yarn basket. But the E3 demo skips that entire tutorial and puts you immediately into the yarn basket room. As you can tell, a lot of changes made after this E3 reveal were specifically done to help the player, teaching them gameplay mechanics and trying to avoid them being confused. Now, of course, just like in Course 1, the results screen of Course 2 is also different. Specifically, look at that different style icon. This one isn't even close to the final version, since the developers ended up reusing the same background for all levels in a world. Now, moving on to Course 3, there really isn't anything new to see here, except you guessed it, the results screen, which features another early icon that's pretty similar to what you see in the retail build.
And that was it for E3 2014. Now, as I said, Yoshi's Woolly World was planned to release in the first half of 2015. But the question on everyone's mind was, when is it actually coming out? Well, in January 2015, Nintendo announced the game's release date to be June 26th. In Europe. Okay, well, what about North America? Surely they'd be close to announcing that release date, right? Right?
And so we waited. And waited. And suddenly it was now June. Months had passed with no release date for this region. It wasn't until E3 2015 that we finally got one for October 16th, 2015. Just missing that first half of 2015 estimate. Ah well, at least there's a demo of the game at E3 2015, one that I myself actually played when I attended E3 that year. As you could probably guess, there were little to no changes in this E3 version. I mean, we're only weeks away from Woolly World's release. Anything they could have possibly changed at this point would be extremely minor. Now, since we had already seen so much of the game last year, the Nintendo Direct for this E3 was less about the game and more about the adorable Yarn Yoshi amiibos. Emi Watanabe was the one who inadvertently made this happen. At the time, she was working in Nintendo's software and planning department and helped design Yoshi's Woolly World. She was a part of the team, but didn't do any programming or modeling, so when development really got going, she didn't have a whole lot of ways to help out directly. So she decided to help out in a different way, by making a real Yarn Yoshi for the development team to reference off of. Yep, she was one of the people that helped with that handmade look that I mentioned earlier. But it didn't just help with the handmade look. People were so impressed with these Yarn Yoshi plushies that a proposal was made to Nintendo to make plushie amiibos for the game. And the company agreed that it would be a fantastic idea. Even though Nintendo didn't have any experience making a toy out of wool, they were just gonna go for it. And it was a lot of hard work. Emi ended up making tons of prototypes for Yarn Yoshi to help produce the new plush amiibos. And when the team finally got to see a sample of the toy for the first time, it was a moving experience that made them feel that all this hard work was worthwhile. You know, speaking of amiibos, those were a huge part of the Woolly World experience. You could scan practically any figure to unlock exclusive patterns for your Yoshi, alongside the designs you could unlock normally throughout the game. But where did this idea of different Yoshi patterns come from? Well, it all stemmed from the game's backgrounds. They were all so varied, and because they were made out of yarn, the team was able to play around with their designs in unique ways. That led the team to think, hey, why don't we play around with Yoshi's design too? While brainstorming, they came up with a ton of different patterns that they were hoping to narrow down to just a few different choices. But the team ended up being so divided on which one should stay and which should go. So in the end, they just decided to keep them all. Originally though, these designs were going to be a lot more than just funny little costumes. At first, the team considered giving each pattern a unique ability to go along with it. But they ran into a problem. They had way too many ideas for costumes and not nearly enough ideas for abilities. So, once again, instead of limiting the amount of patterns, they decided just to make them purely cosmetic and include over 100 designs in the final game.
Alright, I think it's time that we check out what's gone unused in Yoshi's Woolly World. There is a lot of incredibly interesting stuff to look at. So without further ado, let's start with our first unused object, the coin.
There are a couple of unused coins located inside a folder just called Test, and they are incredibly similar to the coins found in Yoshi's Island. They even have sound effects for collecting the red coins that would have increased in pitch every time you collected one, assuming you were fast enough. And fun fact, the first one of these sounds actually did make it into the final game, but it serves a completely different function. Instead of being used when collecting a coin, it's used when Yoshi hops into a stage. But do you know what's even cooler than coins? Unused test maps left over in the game's files. This is what we've all been waiting for. There are a ton of unused maps just waiting to be explored, so let's get to it. Starting with a familiar one, Test UV Regulation X4. Now, the name isn't what should feel familiar, it's the layout of the stage, which is extremely similar to the footage of Yarn Yoshi, shown off during the Wii U Direct in 2013. Unfortunately though, a bunch of objects used in this map no longer exist, and were replaced with placeholder dummy blocks. But if you look past that, this map honestly feels like a real level, at least at the beginning. The further you go in though, the more chaotic it gets, and the more it starts resembling a test map rather than something planned for the final game. And speaking of test map, we're going to be looking at an unused level literally called Test Map 004. It looks like something that could have been included in the final game. That is until you reach this part, which stops your progress thanks to an invisible wall right above you, making you unable to reach the rocky edge up there to continue on. Honestly, looking around, nothing here really feels like a test room. It's all too nice. And that's why I'm happy to introduce you to Test Mori. This is an unused blockout of an actual stage in the game, Stage 2-4. And if you don't know what a blockout is, it's basically just a rough draft of a level that's made typically with simple, untextured shapes like blocks. That means that Test Mori is an incredibly early version of Stage 2-4, and that means there have got to be quite a few differences to this level. For instance, there are a bunch of bombs around here, with the Shy Guy throwing even more, and they are just not here in the final version. And if we go through the left pipe, you'll notice that the platforms are in different positions. The Paratroopa guarding the Wonder Wall was originally a normal Koopa Troopa guarding some beads. And over on the left, you'll find that there were only 2 Piranha Plants instead of 3, and that the Wing Cloud ended up being moved closer to them rather than being in the center of the room. Further along, you would normally have to solve a small puzzle where you'd hit the yarn basket, get some big yarn balls, and blast away the blocks. But in this unused test map, there's no puzzle or any big yarn balls. In fact, there isn't even a way out of here. The problem is with that wing cloud up there. When you hit it, it spawns some beads and a dummy object. It's supposed to spawn a spring ball, so that way you can reach the pipe. But since it doesn't, we're not going to be getting any further here. Seems like most of these unused levels are practically impossible to finish. Take for instance YI Stage 101, which as the name suggests is a remake of Yoshi's Island Stage 1-1. Now it's not the nicest looking remake, it's very simplistic with some bright yellow ground and Shy Guys, and it's also missing a lot of important objects, like the growing flower that's literally required to progress. Thankfully, with Mellow Mode's wings, we can fly right to the end of the stage, which doesn't have a goal ring, so there's no way to complete it anyway. But believe it or not, YI Stage 101 isn't the only unused map that's a remake of another game. Check out Test Luigi U 1-1, which, yeah, is a remake of Stage 1-1 from New Super Luigi U. It's honestly so cute how they attempted to bring this stage over. For instance, the Waddle Wings obviously aren't in Woolly World, so they made them Gusties instead. Unfortunately though, any other objects like the flagpole at the end of the stage ended up becoming dummy objects. There were probably some actual objects made for this unused map, but since they're long gone at this point, we're only gonna get dummy placeholders. Now, if you're getting tired of all these block out levels, have I got a treat for you. This is Map 001 Maruta Master, and it's one of the most complete unused levels in the game. Sure, there's still a lot of dummy objects, but look at all that detailed terrain. It's clear that there was a lot of effort put into this map, so it is so sad that our journey has to stop right here. As you can probably tell, Yoshi is supposed to walk into the background here and continue on with the level, but there is no way to do that. So we're gonna have to move on. But we're moving on to the best, most interesting unused test map in Yoshi's Woolly World, and I think you'll agree with me once you see it. But before we get to that, remember how Yarn Yoshi was going to have stages that took place in the real world? This unused map, called Test Map 009 Shader Test 01, actually takes place in the real world. It all starts on this desk. And what's that over there? Why, it's Good Feels Soda. Isn't that adorable? There's also a hyper-realistic penguin with a top hat hanging out in the background as you move along the top of the table. And that's it. That's the entire map. Based on the name, it was being used by the developers to test shaders that were made to help make the environment look less cartoony and more realistic. And it works very well. It's kind of unsettling in a way.
Now how on earth am I gonna top that? Tons of unused maps crescendoing with an ultra-realistic scene from early in development. What could possibly be more interesting than that? Oh, you'll see.
It all starts with these unused images. You know the stamps you get in the final game by collecting stamp patches? Well, these are early Miiverse stamps. And if you're wondering what the kanji translates to on this one, it literally says unused. They're even accompanied by this image of a swap note envelope called memo.tga that was drawn by one of the developers. Okay, but why do I bring this up? What makes this so interesting? Well, it all has to do with the stamp patches. Remember earlier in the video when I said there was one more unused icon, originally a part of an early pause screen? Well, I think now is the perfect time to show you what it is. It's an early version of the stamp patch that's literally just an image of a Mii's head. These were called Mii beads, and while we don't know exactly what they did, it does give us an idea of an early scrapped feature for the game. It's likely that Woolly World was going to have a lot more to do with Mii's. In the final game, Mii's only make an appearance if you have Miiverse posts turned on, and then they would appear in the hub world to show off posts from around the world. But thanks to these next unused images that were found in the files of Yoshi's Woolly World, we can see they were probably going to be much more integrated into the game itself. They would party with Yoshis, they would ride Yoshis, all while being made entirely out of yarn. And you'll notice from the 2D designs of the Yoshis that these images are from very early in development, back when it was still called Yarn Yoshi. Now these do look less like gameplay screenshots and more like well-made concept art, so it is possible that these were just ideas on how to use Miis that never actually got implemented. But the fact that this Mii bead exists alongside the beads icon from E3 2014 makes me feel like they went further with the idea than just making concept art for it. But be warned that this was all just speculation based on those unused images. And speaking of concept art, there are even more unused images like those in the final game. Take this one for example. It shows us a nice glimpse at a planned stage for Yarn Yoshi, and this unused image shows us that early Yoshi in even more detail. It looks like switching to plush form after eating a Shy Guy would have subtly increased Yoshi's size. Oh, and based on the text, it looks like the developers were using Autodesk Maya for modeling the Yoshis. Now, I don't know if this next unused image is from back when the game was called Yarn Yoshi, but what I do know is that it is an adorable image of two Shy Guys saying stage clear. But I saved the best for last. These final two unused images left over in the files of Yoshi's Woolly World are kind of incredible, at least to me. These are actual screenshots of early development builds of the game. The first one, I wager, is very early in development due to the fact that the Lives icon looks like the 2D version of Yoshi. Now, the player model is in 3D, but it's possible the player just ate a Shy Guy or something before the screenshot was taken. The second unused screenshot appears to be from a later build of the game. Both Yoshi's icon and model look much closer to the final version, as he hops around in this bonus stage. Now, how do I know that that's a bonus stage? Well, it literally says so on the upper right corner, Stage ID-bonus map 003. The screenshot from before also had this label on screen, but it doesn't list the stage name. It just says Model Viewer, and directly underneath it shows how many seconds have elapsed since the start of the stage. And here's something really cool. This same debug label appears in another game too, and as I said before, I made a Beta64 episode all about it. Yeah, it's Super Mario Bros. Wonder. The prototype footage shared by Nintendo shows this same debug label at the same position with the same font, just a different color and size. Now, we technically don't know if it's the same debug environment, but I just thought that it was a cool parallel, showing how interconnected all these Nintendo games are even 10 plus years later.
So that was Yoshi's Woolly World, a wonderful game with a surprisingly smooth development. No major issues, no dramatic make or break moments. The developers were given plenty of time and space to experiment and try new things from beginning to end. If that hadn't happened, we probably would have gotten a lot simpler of a game, something more akin to Kirby's Epic Yarn. But instead, we got a fully fleshed out Yoshi game with the adorable Yarn Yoshi amiibo that shows just how passionate the team was to make sure that Yoshi's Woolly World was both fun to look at and fun to play. And I'd say they did a great job.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if video game history and cut content is exactly what you're looking for, you're in the right place. That's what Beta64 is all about. I've got tons of videos for games new and old, and tons of stuff in the works. So be sure to subscribe, check out the rest of my videos, and be sure to have a fantastic rest of your day.